founder, CEO of WG Content, builder of Kind Businesses, author of Your Cultural Balance Sheet, The Keys to Creating an Environment Where People Can Thrive. Kristy Pretzinger, thank you very much indeed for joining me. Welcome to the Leadership That Sells podcast, where we help you lead first and sell more with great insights and tactics from the best minds we can find. Every leader is in sales, whether you're selling products, ideas, a mission, or a vision, and great sales team in particular need great sales leaders. When managers bring out the best in their teams, targets get hit on time every time without stress. But most sales leaders never learn how to lead. They wing it or they repeat bad habits and the cycle continues. Sales leaders need practical, real-world ideas that fit their busy schedules, and that's why we created the Leadership That Sells Playbook course. 9 short weeks changes your world. Check it out at the Practical Leadership Academy. And now, on with the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Paul. I look forward to our conversation.
Now, that was a far too brief introduction for somebody with a magnificent background in both building businesses and shaping content and shaping people's lives. Can you give me a bit more meat on the bone, please?
Certainly. I started out as a freelance writer a long time ago, and then started building WG Content, which was formerly known as Writer Girl back when we first started building it,
It's a great
probably
name.
almost 20 years ago, I think. And I said to my accountant at the time that if I couldn't build a business based on kindness, I would go back to being a freelance writer. And then, as any entrepreneur knows, you just put your head down, you're wearing all the hats, you're doing all the things, trying to make sure that you've got money coming in. And it wasn't until about 5 years ago when we had a group of consultants we were working with, and we discovered them interviewing all of the employees. They were trying to find out what was the core of our business, the thing without which we would not exist. And come to find out, it was our culture. And that was an epiphany for me, because I realized then, looking back in hindsight, that intending to build a business based on kindness indeed had happened, and it had informed the structure and the processes and the procedures that we have in this organization. And it really is it's what gives my life and my work meaning and purpose.
So would you say kindness was your number one value when you set out? Did you paint it on the wall?
That's interesting, because we are virtual, so we don't have any walls. But what we do, that's a really good question. What we do is we came up together with a much smaller group of people, but we came up with our values, I don't know how many years ago, and they're very easy to remember. We are empowered, curious, kind, and fun. They kind of roll off your tongue. And our mission is building relationships one word at a time, which makes sense since we are a content company. The thing about our values is, pardon me, I always say that your values should remain the same. They should be constant. You don't go changing your values. The expression of them may change, but the values should remain the same. And in our case, our values are a thread that goes all the way through our organization. And I say that the values, that thread, is something upon which all decisions can hang. So our employees every single one of them can tell you what our values are. We have different things in place to reinforce those. For example, in our monthly team meeting, our HR person will solicit kudos based on a certain value. So like, let's say this month it's empowered. And so she will ask people to recognize someone who has demonstrated empowerment. And so it's top of mind. People are thinking about it. They are recognizing it in their associates, and then they are awarded, it's pulled out of a hat, and someone gets what we call the Woohoo Cup. They don't get a Woohoo Cup anymore, they used to, but they're recognized for living out one of the values. So we do things like that to make sure that they're top of mind, as opposed to just being something on a wall.
My wife used to work for a very large corporate, 100,000 people, and they had values laminated in a little card around your neck, like a dog tag. I love those lanyards. The lanyards is the replacement for wearing ties. Men don't wear ties anymore. And the ties,
Yes.
of course, they were a symbol of the indentured nature of your service, right? So now
I
we
agree.
have these dog
Mhm.
collars with zipper thingies on them.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
you had this laminated card with happiness, collaboration, and whatever the heck it was. Just that rubbish.
Right.
And
Right.
the question is always, are your values lived or are they laminated? I think. And
Oh,
yours
that's
are
a really
obviously
good way of putting
lived,
it.
right?
Yeah.
And the thing that you hit precisely on, I think, when it comes to value sets are, is can you use them as a decision-making tool?
I mean,
If you
what's the
were to
point
make a
of having them?
decision, exactly. If you're to make a
And
decision,
you can hire and you can fire based on values.
yes.
You know, you should be able to. People should be able, if you say someone, look, we have talked to you about this and you do not demonstrate kindness,
Mm.
you aren't a fit, you know, for the organization. And you know that pretty quickly. We don't have a lot of issues around that, but you should be able to, based on those things, if they really are important to you, if they mean something to you and the way you're building your business, then you should be able to hire and fire around those.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, fun is a hard word. Fun.
Yeah.
Let's have fun. The beatings will continue until fun is had, or till morale improves, that sort of thing. I like fun. Fun's joy. I prefer joy, but fun
I
is good
love the
enough.
word joy. Yeah,
Fun is good.
yeah, it's that kind of works because empowered, curious, kind, and joyful would work because that actually is one of my favorite words, and also one of the things that from where I sit as the leader of the organization is when we are instituting new things, like we did a big tech stack change a couple years ago, and so from where I sat, I was always asking the question, have we overdone it with this technology where we've removed the joy from the daily work? Because I want to make sure that even though it's hard, work is sometimes hard, it's not always fun, but is there some joy in what you're doing, whether that's working with the people that you're working with, or you get to actually create something you're proud of? Are we sucking the joy out of it? We always want to make sure that we hold on to that.
Sucking the joy out of it. Yeah, I like that. It's like going to your doctor and your doctor tells you, well, you should move on to decaffeinated coffee. You say, oh, great. Let me just
Yeah,
suck the last remnants of joy out of my morning. Thank you.
exactly.
Not going to happen.
Right.
I love that. So kindness. When we were chatting before, you mentioned rage and rudeness. And I think a lot of that comes from fear. In fact, it always comes from fear. I'm angry about things. I'm offensive towards other people because I'm fearful of something. Sometimes not even the person or whatever they're talking about, but I'm fearful of my lack of control or whatever it is. And on the other side of fear, of course, is there are only two emotions, in my opinion. There's fear and there's love. And everything else is a shade in between. And I think it's when you have yourself at the center of your universe, you are fearful. When you put other people at the center of your universe, you can be joyful, you can be loving, right? And we don't talk about love in business at all because it's kind of taboo, and you don't want to get a call from HR saying, "Were you loving people again, Martin?" Well, no, 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 no. Well, yes, actually, in my own special way.
Well, because in English, the word love, we have one word for it, unlike
Yes.
many other languages. And I do use the word love because one definition of love in English is wishing the well-being of others. So I genuinely wish for the well-being of the people that I work with. So indeed, I do love them and demonstrate love. And I don't, of course, I'm also a woman saying that. So I recognize that it is a little less fraught when a woman says something like that in an all female employed, all of the people who work with WG content as employees are women. Our contractors include men, but so it's easier to use that language than it is for a man to walk around saying, I love you. You'd be like, well, wait, what? Why are you talking that way? I do understand the nuances there.
I mean, C.S. Lewis writes about the four loves, and I talk about this a lot, but I love them. I love them, huh? You have storge, which is the family, the familiar ones, the parent to the child. You have philia, which is the close friendship. You have eros, of course, the erotic, the romantic love, the one that everybody thinks it is. And then you have the one I think you just mentioned there, which is the well-being of the other, which is the agape love. It's the building up of the other, the magnanimity, the desire for greatness in other people. And take your own annoying, selfish self out, you put other people in, and you can't be full of rage. You can't be rude because your motive for doing this, for putting the other person into the center of your universe, is to build them up. How are you going to do that if you're mean? You know, calms you
I
down.
also think that one of the things, I'm sure you're familiar with Simon Sinek,
Mm,
and he talks a lot about the psychological safety, and that when you talk about we, then you take care of me.
mm.
So by being inclusive that way,
Yes.
that you are automatically taken care of. So it's not as that you don't have to take yourself out of it, but you make sure you include everyone in it. And then that way, when it's a we collectively, it changes the perspective and perhaps your behavior. But back to what you were talking about, fear and love. I frequently think that the rage, when people are angry, yes, it is often fear. I also think that anger is an emotion that's easier to access because it's out there. It's like directed outward. And sometimes and frequently, I think that it's masking hurt. And hurt is vulnerable. People
Mm.
don't want to be hurt. They don't want to be vulnerable. They want to make sure that they keep that shell up and nothing hurts me and I'm this whatever I am. And so anger is much easier to express than the real vulnerability of humanity. The thing that is what we all are.
Yeah. I think, like you said as well, the fear side is locked in. I'm closed. I have this shellac shell covering everything, and to break it down, to move other people into your universe, requires this two-way.
Mhm.
Requires this presentation of self, of towards the other.
Mhm.
And what's the line? Is the people won't they won't know how much you care until you know how they know how much that I can't remember exactly what the phrase.
Uh, it- yeah, what is that? The one about they don't know how much you care until they don't care how much you know it, but they
Something
they
like
don't know how
that.
much you know until they know how much you care. I think it's something like that.
That's the bunny. That's it. Say that
Yeah.
again. Say that one again.
People don't care how much you know, they care how they want to know how much you care.
That's it. It's trite, but there's the nub of
True,
truth is in there. Yes.
true.
Yes. And so that's, I think, how you move towards this idea of vulnerability is that you have to give of yourself. But there's a lot, and I have a question for you as a who talks about vulnerability a lot. How do I remain authentic in whatever the context is by sharing the one or two or three stories that I have about this that I use all the time because I don't really want to bring my full self to work. I want to bring the right self to work. I want to bring the right attitude, the right posture, the right behaviors to my work environment because how I am and who I am with my friends is the same person, but I have different doors that are open at different times. We're right now it's the 11th of November, so we've got 11 little doors in our advent calendar open. Okay, you open the little door and maybe there's a chocolate in there or whatever it is, but you open up a door and you have a combination of these doors in yourself that are open for work and a different combination that are open at home and a different combination that are open with your friends. I want to be human and connected, but vulnerable, especially for men, is a challenge.
I think that I talk about this a lot because I coach other leaders, and especially someone like you mentioned, your wife worked in a really large organization. And um, I work with a lot of people who work in large organizations and hospital systems all over the country. And what I talk about is that as a leader, even if you're just a leader in your family or your friend group, if you don't have anyone reporting to you, people are still watching you. You are somehow, somewhere leading people. And when I talk about things like vulnerability, when you're in a large organization, you have to be discerning about how vulnerable you can be up. But you can choose to be vulnerable out and down. That's what you can control. And when I
Mm,
say vulnerability, I'm not suggesting that you open the kimono and tell everybody, your deepest, darkest secrets. That's inappropriate anyway, and it makes people uncomfortable. But if you can be just a little bit self-deprecating or acknowledge that you've made some mistakes, um, then what happens, in my own experience, is that people like you more when you're willing to say, oh, gosh, I've done that too, or God, I made this huge mistake, blunder, whatever, nothing tremendously serious, but something you can talk about. But then they like you more, and it makes them know that it's a safe place for them to be vulnerable. And that's how you build relationship. I mean, you can build a surface relationship if you so choose. That just isn't, I don't want to live my life that way. I don't have time to, talk about the weather. I've got, precious amounts of days, and I want them to be meaningful. And in my own life and in my own experience, the thing that makes those days meaningful is the connections that I have and with people. And when I think about leadership in particular, I think about the privilege that I have to feed into the lives of the people that I lead, and I take that very seriously. And while I take it seriously, I also try to bring a bit of humor, obviously self-deprecating humor in some of it, but really understanding what we talked about earlier, the need of everyone that you come in contact with. I don't care if it's the CEO of a huge multinational corporation or the person that sweeps up at night when nobody's there. The commonality is that every single one of us needs to know that we matter. We need to know that is hugely, vastly important to our well-being. And as we talked about earlier, you can't matter in isolation. You have to matter in community, in relationship with someone else.
Yeah. There's the concept, definition of wisdom, which I quite like, which is your experience and your knowledge combined, which is so you've learned things and then you've used them, and then the fact that you've reflected upon the outcomes. But then my son was talking to me the other day, and he's 10, and he said, "Dad, you're wrong." Okay, fair enough. 10-year-old philosopher king, because he spends his life at school, right, with teachers, and he said, "You've got to share it." Okay,
You got to what?
share it. You've got to share it, right? In context with others. So if you're not in the context of others, in community, the heck's the point? So you might have all the knowledge in the world, you might have all the experience, which is great, good for you, and you even thought about it, wonderful. You're sitting at the top of your mountain in the lotus position and, underneath the cherry tree. Good for you, well done. So what? What are you going to do about it? You're going to share it. You're going to share it, good and bad and indifferent.
I agree with you completely because I am so not a Buddhist, but the Buddhists frequently don't share. They ponder in isolation but that's a different kind of choice, I think, than the great philosophers, Seneca and Marcus Aurelius and all those people, that they thought and pondered and reflected and then wrote about it and shared it with people, right? I mean, that's the
Stood
whole
up in the
point.
forum.
Exactly, so that we can all become better people and then ponder what they were pondering and then share it with other people. I completely agree with you that you do need to share it. That's actually the application of wisdom, isn't it?
It is. And in community, I think, is where you're sharing to the benefit of others. It goes to one of those four loves. It goes to your idea of the idea of building other people up. It's everything. So it is the other, I think, is the concept I'm trying to get to tackle just now. Is how do you deal with, you said the cynic talks about the we. There's no, it includes the we, it includes the me. I quite like that. I think there's a great deal of challenge in approaching the we, because so many people just need to get themselves out of the way first. I don't know.
Oh,
Still,
yeah.
still working on this.
I think that's a sophisticated concept. I think I
Didn't say it
feel
was going to be an easy conversation, Kirsty.
no, I feel strongly that self-awareness cannot be overestimated in its importance in everything in life. If you lack self-awareness, first of all, as you work on your own personal development and develop more self-awareness, you become very aware of the lack of self-awareness of the people around you, and it can be kind of annoying. But in terms of really back to the wisdom, pondering and learning about yourself, especially in particular as a leader, understanding that, I think about all the work that I did, as we mentioned earlier. I definitely went to therapy, and then I've had a lot of coaches over the year, and I've done a lot of reading and studying and self-reflection and application of all of that, learning about the edges of my personality that can be off-putting, not only as a leader, but just in life, but importantly in work, in leadership, and then moderating those because I am an adult. I am a grown-up and I can moderate that behavior because I've learned about myself that there are various things that if I for example, I am a fast processor. That doesn't make me smarter. It can make me impulsive, but it can also be very irritating to people who process more slowly and are just as bright, if not brighter than me. And so I've learned that I have to slow down and I have to stop speaking to give them the space to process and share because I want to know what they know. I don't know what they know. I already know what I know. So unless I stop talking and engage and give space for them to share, I'm going to miss that. I mean, I don't think I knew that 15 years ago, but I learned it and I still have to practice it. It's not my natural, it's not my go-to. My go-to is to just talk and keep going, but it's like, okay, moderate your behavior and allow someone else to speak so that you can learn something. So that's what I think is really important in all of this. The we thing is you can't do that we unless you learn to you have self-awareness and can moderate your own behavior to allow space for the we. Because otherwise it's all me, 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 like a 3-year-old. And I'm not a 3-year-old and I don't want to behave like a 3-year-old. So that's how you can
Sometimes.
allow for the we, you know?
Yeah, yeah. And the self-awareness thing is wonderful. It's the mirror into the soul of the other, I think, is if you know yourself, if you want to know about other people, first know yourself. Because
Absolutely.
the answer to everything is within your own soul, right? Yes, deeply felt, deeply felt. Okay. What is a cultural balance sheet and why did you write a book about one?
Well, culture, as I mentioned, you can get from the conversation, building an environment where people can thrive has been the thing that really has brought meaning and purpose to my life, other than being a mother to my wonderful son. But the business that I've had the privilege of building is the next thing that's brought me the most joy, and it's because of caring about these people. So I'm in an organization called Entrepreneurs Organization. I don't know if you're familiar. It's global. It's in like 75 countries, and it's all just business owners. So it's a peer group. And I was in a small group, it's called a forum. And one of my forum mates would frequently tell me that I should write a book. And I was like, yeah, yeah, yeah. And we were having dinner one night. And a lot of these people in my forum have had successful exits from their business, meaning they've either sold it or gotten investment, PE money and decided to grow it or whatever. So we were talking about things like EBITDA and multiples of selling a business. And I'm a person who often doesn't know what I think until I say it. And so I was sitting there kind of musing and I said, I do look at my balance sheet. Of course I do. And I said, but it's almost like I look at my business through the lens of a cultural balance sheet. And so my friend, looked at me and he goes, well, there's your book. I was like, oh, shoot, now I'm going to have to do this. Took me long enough, took me about 2 years. And I wouldn't have been able to do it without my co-author, who also happens to be an employee, and she's a brilliant writer. So anyway, what the cultural balance sheet, the analogy that we pull through here is obviously cultural assets, cultural liabilities, cultural equity. But it's a little bit different. It's a great way of breaking down the topics within a book into chunks that make sense. What we discovered and what I discovered through kind of developing a signature talk around this and then working through what the book was going to be is that, and this is sometimes true on a financial balance sheet, but on a cultural balance sheet, the liabilities that you have, if you have an intention to examine them and want to give attention to them to, as I mentioned earlier, moderate your behavior, whatever it happens to be, you can actually turn those liabilities into assets on your cultural balance sheet. And the cultural equity in this example is the actual culture that you build as a result of your inquiry and curiosity about your assets and your liabilities that then results in the culture, which is the culture of we, which also takes care of me. So we go through and break that down. There's a lot of keys. They're in digestible chunks because, as we mentioned, everyone has the attention span of a gnat nowadays. And we wanted things to be digestible, but also actionable. Like, what can you actually do here to begin to create an environment where people can thrive?
Okay. In those three chunks, what's your favorite one? Give us an example.
Well, all of it really comes down to people, and on a financial balance sheet, the only place people show up is as a liability, which is absurd. Um,
Yes.
I mean, that's crazy because you don't have anything without the people. So, again, it all comes back to that, the privilege that you have as a leader of feeding into the lives of these people, and then breaking that down. That's kind of a high ideal. Well, what do you actually do? And so there's a whole bunch of things that we actually do that are all meant to really ensure the well-being of the people in the organization. And it's interesting because we have an editor, as I mentioned, my co-author works in the organization. She's been here for 10 years, so she has experienced and builds this culture. We co-create it together. So she's experienced firsthand. So we know what we're talking about. Our outside editor doesn't work here. And so he'd be like, well, you need to explain that more. One of them that is so obvious to me, but he was like, well, people aren't going to understand that. And what it was is we start every meeting, if there are 3 or more people, every meeting begins with a meditation. And the way that we do that is that usually they'll just rotate it. So if it's just a quick get together, it's up to you. This isn't some rigidity thing where you have to start with a meditation. But if it's a structured meeting and you have, like, say, your pod meeting every other week, and there's 8 of you in the meeting, you know that someone is going to be assigned, you're going to rotate, and it's going to be, okay, Chris, this week, you're the one who comes with the meditation. It could be a 2-minute breathing exercise to a 5-minute guided meditation. It's up to you. But the reasoning behind that is, first of all, meditation, we all know, is amazing, but a lot of people aren't familiar with that. And when they first join the organization, they're like, well, this is weird to start a meeting with a meditation. And then they realize that it helps you become present to the virtual room that you are in, because we are frequently in virtual meetings, as the world is now, but being present to that space, because a lot of times people come flying into that meeting, they just ended another one, and they're not present at all. They're jumbling with their papers. They don't even know why they're in this meeting. And if you take anywhere from 2 to 5 minutes to just breathe collectively, then you create the space for meaning to happen in that space and to talk about whatever that meeting is for, and you can be present to one another. So really kind of digging into those kind of things, and that directly contributes to the well-being of the people in the organization, and it enforces a meditative practice without them having to get up every morning and meditate for 15 minutes. Another thing that we do is we instituted something where, again, we're virtual, so people start their workday at whatever time works for them. It's perfectly fine. It's very flexible. But I wanted people to start, when you start your workday, set your alarm, and after 50 minutes, take a 10-minute break from your devices. Don't check email. Don't be on your phone. Go throw in a load of laundry, take your dog for a walk, do some stretching, do whatever you want. And the intention of that is to help people intentionally protect their attention span, because we need to control that. We are not ever going to live in a device-free world. So you need to have agency over your devices as opposed to letting them control you and that algorithm control you. But even more importantly for the business and for the people, innovation and creativity happens in the gaps. If you are constantly flying from meeting to meeting and not taking a breath to go to the bathroom, get a cup of coffee, put your dog out, whatever it is you have to do to live your life, there's no time for innovation and creativity. And that's, you need the gaps to allow for that free-flowing thought, to have an idea occur to you without constantly something being put in there to allow you to reflect, as we've talked about. So those are just 2 little things that really contribute to creating that environment where people can thrive, that then carries out into their lives. I can't tell you how many of my employees have said that by instituting that 10 minutes, and they do it differently. One of the employees said she needs to work. She's a strategist, and she needs to work in longer blocks of time, uninterrupted, like 3 hours. And she said, so then she'll work 3 hours and take 30 minutes away from her devices. And she said she discovered that at the end of the day, she thought she was always supposed to just be completely depleted with an empty tank at the end of the workday. And by doing this, she's like, I realize I'm still half full at the end of the day, which gives me time to parent my daughter, to live my life. And I'm like, well, that's the privilege of leading into someone's life.
Mhm.
I mean, it bleeds into their lives, not just the time that they're working with you. And that's a tremendous privilege and an honor to be able to do that.
These are beautiful techniques, but I think what's absolutely evident is that they are techniques, strategies, tactics, call them what you want, that are underpinned with a deep sense of responsibility, of honoring the other person, with a huge pragmatism as well, commercial pragmatism behind them. Because I bet you your performance from your team is amazing.
Oh yeah, I
Simply,
mean, they really are the one of the coaches that we work with. She's also a friend of mine, but she works with my leadership team, and she's met most of the people on the team. And she's been a coach for like 30 years in business and larger corporations mostly. But she said that she's never run into a group of such intelligent people who are also creative. And she said, and they would run through fire for you, Kristy. And I was like, well, it's because they know I would run through fire for them. Like, I don't allow a client to mistreat employees. I mean, I am more than happy to, they don't even know who I am, most of the clients, because I work on the business, not in it. But I will call somebody and say, hey, our values are empowered, curious, kind, and fun. And none of those things are happening on either side here. I'm not sure this is a fit because I've worked too hard to build this environment to allow some outsider to come in and tear it up.
pollute it.
And another thing that I want to share that is incredibly valuable that this coach said to me, and it was a throwaway point for her, and for me it was an epiphany. It might be for your listeners as well. She said that the amount of dysfunction on a team is directly correlated to the amount of dysfunction the leader is comfortable with in their own life. And I was like, oh, wow. That's amazing. And that's where, for me, I'm like, oh, so this is where the tens of thousands of dollars of therapy is paying off because I worked too hard to eliminate that kind of dysfunction from my life to allow it to creep in to this work environment that I have really focused on building. And I thought that was a really valuable point back to the self-awareness, right? If things are crazy around you, you might want to look in the mirror and see how you are contributing to that.
Totally, totally. I think it goes to, I'm not sure if it's called the law of the lid or something like that.
Oh,
But
yes. Yep,
yeah,
it is.
yeah, it's the idea that no
John
team,
Maxwell, no any higher
Maxwell's,
than the level of its leader.
that's it. Yeah.
Yep.
They'll meet your dysfunction where they find it. They'll meet your integrity. They'll
Well, that's why
meet
you
your
don't ever call your business, don't call it a family.
no.
Because first of all, you don't fire your brother, number one. Number two, you don't bring that dysfunction in here because everybody's got some sort of dysfunction in their family. And if they don't, they're not paying attention because they do. If you have two people, you have some dysfunction. I mean, you just do. And you don't want them bringing that in there. It's like, no,
Yeah,
no, we can create our own dysfunction and then we can get rid of it.
that's
But you're
it.
not going to bring your family stuff in here.
I love it. All right. Christy, where can we find you when we need you?
You can go to wgcontent.com and there's an about us. You can find all sorts of stuff there. I'm also on LinkedIn, just Kristy Pretzinger on LinkedIn. I'm happy to connect at any time with anybody.
Marvelous. And the book is out. When's the book out?
The book comes out at the end of January.
End of January. Magnificent. Christy Pretzinger, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, Paul. I've really enjoyed our conversation.